Welcome to the High Performance Edge, the podcast for contractors who lead with building science and want to turn that advantage into a stronger, more successful business. Whether you're in HVAC, insulation, solar, or home performance, we dig into strategy, sales, marketing, operations, hiring, and customer service approaches that power stable, more profitable companies. Hear from top contractors and industry experts as we explore what it takes to thrive as a very different kind of contractor. Here's your host, founder and CEO of Energy Circle, Peter Trost.
Hey folks, thanks for being here. A fellow contractor in California once said of Dan Perunko, if you can get Dan to work on your house, you've won the lottery. I've been in homes Dan has worked on and the indoor environment is remarkable. Dan owns and runs Balance Point Home Performance in the California foothills, and he's built something the whole industry says shouldn't work. An intentionally small company, just him and a few guys, doing comprehensive work that is almost always north of $50,000 and can run into the hundreds of thousands. He does very little marketing, and he still can't keep up with the leads, in part because he's very clear on his website that he only does deep, comprehensive retrofits and might not be a good fit for everyone, and yet people still line up. The goal of scaling building retrofits gets a lot of attention, and for understandable reasons. There are a lot of buildings to fix, and we're moving way too slow. Dan's chosen a different approach, but remains committed to having a big industry impact. He does exceptional work, deeply informed by building science, but he also teaches, sharing what he knows openly at conferences and trainings both in California and across the country, including being one of the founders and organizers of the Forum on Measured Performance, formerly known as the Dry Climate Forum, one of the most technically advanced events of the year. He's really smart and articulate and a very good person. Here's my interview with Dan Perunko of Balance Point Home Performance. Dan Perunko, welcome. It's great to have you. Years ago, you gave this now infamous presentation at what was then the Home Performance Coalition Association and the antecedent or whatever of ACI. You gave this what was kind of a TEDx talk, and it was called Two Guys in a Truck. And it was essentially a defense of the small high performance business model in the face of what then, and I think now, is the thing you hear about all the time, which is the most important thing is scale. We have 124 million homes that we have to fix, and we need to figure out scale. And you gave this great presentation and sort of saying, wait a second, there is a different way. And I'm just curious if we go back to what motivated you to do that in that moment. It doesn't always have to be about scale.
Yeah. I feel mostly the same way. So many of the efforts to scale focus so much on scale and so little on the details. It always kind of feels to me, looking at a lot of those jobs, like, oh, great, that's done. And we subsidize that and it still needs to be fixed. And so the scale causes us to go so fast, so quickly that it kind of feels like the definition of insanity. We're turning to the people who we wish were different and we're saying, here's some money, do this thing. And then they do what they were doing before. It's hard for me to believe we're making as big a step forward as we think we are.
Well, I guess how much of that is born out of the fact that you're in California, right? Which, as states go, California's been at it longer, has tried things, and they haven't always been successful. But certainly, California is probably the place where the attempt at scale has been the greatest. And I think what I hear you saying is you witnessed the real world of what has happened when that's been the objective.
Yeah. First of all, California has tried a ton of stuff, and a lot of what we have done really didn't work that well, right? So if you're outside of California thinking, oh, it's so wonderful, they have Title 24 and this and that, and I see the signs at conferences. Yeah, we still do a lot of things that aren't great. And I do think that things are better than they were 10 years ago. But if we know what the answer is, we're still a long way from just executing it.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good time to just shift into, all right, tell us about Balance Point. And when we use the term high performance, I would describe the work that Dan does, as extremely high performance. And, I've had the pleasure of being in houses that you have fixed and have worked on. So tell us a little bit of, about the company, about Balance Point, and the kind of the nature of the kind of work that you do.
Okay. So Balance Point grew out of Home Performance with Energy Star in 2007. And we had this idea that everything that mattered with respect to air quality, comfort, and energy could be measured in some way. And so that if we could figure out what the design criteria were and then implement the design criteria and then have a way to close the loop with something we could actually measure, we could do better work. And the company still sort of exists on that principle. People call me up and say, I need a heat pump. Great. We're going to do a load calculation. No, I don't want to pay for that. That's great. Call this other company, right? Like we just always do all of the steps with the goal that when the job is done, we're going to do as many pieces as we possibly can. We're going to improve comfort, air quality, moisture balance, building durability, right? And energy consumption sort of all together in every project that we touch. And we've evolved some. I have some great contracting partners that are doing pieces of that now. And I'm only doing sort of the mechanical side of it, but the project is still doing all of the pieces, right? And that's really what I want to do. I want to do houses where when we're done, it's healthier, more comfortable. The bills are lower, like all of the parts.
Okay. Walk us through what a typical job might look like. And if you're willing to say so, like what's the ticket size for what you typically do?
Yeah. So I thought a bunch about the answer to that question. So if in the jobs where I'm partnering with a contractor who's doing really great building enclosure, whether it's new or retrofit, then it's mechanical only, right? And so ducted heat pump system somewhere between $28,000 and $40,000 for that piece, maybe somewhere between sort of like $7,000 and $10,000 for that piece. And in those jobs, they're doing air sealing and insulation and all that. Work scope I'm working on for an 1880s Victorian. There are 16 items in the work scope, and there are items that I really want to have in there that the customer is resisting that may not make the cut. And we're just shy of $100,000 for that particular job right now. But it's a 3-story Victorian, right? Like everything about it is weird. It's construction that nobody does anymore. And so it's tons of detail. And so we're sort of all like spread all the way out between those two extremes. And in the middle, there's $30,000 to $40,000 ducted heat pump, air seal, re-insulate the attic, sort of standard single-story house jobs that fit into there as well.
But it sounds like there is, with a rare exception where you get hired to just do the mechanicals, it sounds like that typically is more of a like full remodel or a new construction thing. In every retrofit job, you are doing a comprehensive envelope and mechanical systems.
Yeah. When people call and they say, I want insulation, if I can't get them to acknowledge that insulation in and of itself is just a piece of the system and we're not doing enough pieces of the system for the building to perform as well as I want it to, they literally just give them somebody else's phone number. Say, listen, I trust this guy. Call him. Ask for Robert and he'll take care of you. Right. And because I just don't want to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned subcontractors or, folks that you have worked with, like in the job you just mentioned, the Victorian, is there some partnership with a subcontractor for parts of it?
I'm starting to get a little smarter about managing my own time. Historically, would have done every piece. Mm-hmm. I just gave away really profitable tankless water heater swap in that job. It's going to stay gas for a variety of reasons. And I couldn't do it fast enough. And I would have to do that piece of the install myself. My guys don't know that work. And so that kind of stuff, if I have to have my hands on it for too many hours, it causes way too many problems. So I've started giving away things like that. And, that's a one-day thing that was probably a couple grand in profit that a plumber whom I think very highly of got it. I just called him up, said, I need you here. Can you do it?
So when you did that presentation, the title of it was Two Guys in a Truck. It was you and Gavin, your original partner, who has since retired. What is the size of the company now, and what does your crew look like?
So I have 2 full-time people and a half-time person. I'm starting to look at adding a third person. There's sort of 2 obstacles to sort of crew growth. For me, one is finding people who they don't have to be. In fact, my guys have very little trade skill, which also means that they need a lot of attention, right? So I'm growing very slowly, but I think it's about time to try to bring in another guy. So 3 to 5 people is sort of balance point standard size, in me being one of them. And I actually, for the first time, I'm contemplating trying to bring in some administrative help because if you could see the sides of my desk, right, I could use a little bit of help keeping up.
Yes.
But we're really small.
Yeah. I endorse the administrative support. So, but is it intentional that you bring in people who are not experienced? And you tend to hear a lot amongst high performance contractors that want to do HVAC right, for example, that you can't hire anybody from the traditional HVAC industry.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like my guys think it's normal to spend days just building duct, right? Where an HVAC contractor thinks, especially one who's had some success as a field tech, right? He thinks he shouldn't have to do ducts anymore, right? Only the mechanical stuff, and generally in a place where you can stand up. Right? Like, my guys just dug under a different Victorian to make room for the equipment and the duct system, and they dug way more than I thought they were going to, because once they had it in their head that there had to be enough room, they just went and made room wherever they needed it. They spent days under there, and it lowered my profit margin on that job. And I was so happy that they sort of like took it on that, okay, this stuff has to perform properly. It can't be squished. It can't be bent, like it has to be right, which means I'm going to spend an extra half day digging over here. And so I don't think I could get normal HVAC folks to do that.
Got it. Okay. And just to wrap up the Balance Point story, if you're willing, would you tell us what your annual revenue is? And I think at the same time, make sure to fill in the fact that you have some other sources of income in the company that are not necessarily contracting.
Yeah. So part of why Balance Point is so successful is we created this recognition of expertise in the world, right? And that for Balance Point came from public speaking and then training. And so I expect to bring in a little over 600,000 total this year, which I know, like those of you out there, like that's tiny, right? We're a little tiny company, but for us, we can make everybody's life good, right? With that much money. So 600 grand, 60% of it from construction, 40% of it from training. And we do things like, profit share and retirement. I don't have health care for employees. And I'm trying to build in skill-based raises. And it's interesting because these guys are not they do really good work. I sometimes think they don't even really know why, right? Like they just happen to like this job. I take good care of them. They do what I ask them to do. And they know so little about building science that like leading them with training is actually kind of hard. So periodically I just end up giving them a raise because they're devoted, right? Good. Even though I can't get them to take on this certification or that skill. Yeah. It's an interesting balance.
Yeah. Are you spending any less time on job sites than historically?
This year I'm spending 80% less time than I ever have before. It's been a really interesting shift. And for my quality of life, it's amazing. The jobs are not worse. They're occasionally a little messier and they're a little bit less profitable. As in, like I show up and say, nope, that's not what we talked about. Take that apart and build it the way we discussed. Right? Because I'm not walking away from these jobs with them not working properly.
Yeah.
And so there's a little struggle, but at the same time, it's just great. Being able to work on other parts of the business and have a little more time off here and there has been super useful.
Okay, good. Well, let's transition to talking a little bit about how the work finds you, right? It is, I think a lot of people listening to this and hearing about this Victorian job, for example, at $100,000 and many of your jobs being well north of $50,000, saying that this is a unique customer base, right? First of all, how you've built this reputation over time that people know this about you and you get these calls.
Yeah. I think about this because I sometimes, I go out into the world and I speak and like, you should do this, right? Like everybody should be just like this at conferences or whatever. And then I think, okay, in fairness, my phone rings and I'm getting these really mature leads. And then I'm so small that I'm losing half of them. Or like I don't perform well on a significant number of them, which, should horrify some of the business consultants out there. And so I think to replicate that, Gavin and I are both smart and we speak well and we're committed to understanding building science, right? So the folks that were on that path ahead of us adopted us. And so lucky, maybe we deserved it. Maybe we were just lucky. If you were out there and you wanted to sort of create this mature market where people are looking for you, I think you just have to be out in the community a lot, right? Like you have to be the person who is doing a slideshow, talking about what existing buildings are like. And, like your house looked like this one. Look at what's in the attic, right? And this is what it causes, right? And we did those kinds of talks for years before we sort of started getting other training gigs that accelerated the people looking for us. But every time I did a talk, I got a job out of it every single time.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
Even professional audiences?
No, those were all community audiences.
Okay.
The least rewarding talking that I do for Balance Point's bottom dollar is talking at national conferences. I never get any work from any of that stuff, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that you haven't talked about is that you have built a lot of authority based on your participation in the community, and you're one of the founders of the Forum on Measured Performance, this conference formerly known as the Dry Climate Forum that happens in Yosemite every year and is really the mecca for the really thoughtful building science community in California. And you speak at you train at PG&E and you do all these things. How much of that work, which is much more industry facing, do you think is partially responsible for your success?
I think it's huge, actually. And the like training for PG&E piece is super valuable and not available to everybody, right? So put that aside. If you get an offer to do training for one of the utilities, absolutely take it. Most of us are not going to. But things like the Forum on Measured Performance, Measured Home Performance, which used to be the Dry Climate Forum. Like, we just created that. We were at summer camp and we said, this should be happening in other places. So we went home and we invented a conference, right? And we leaned on every friendship and connection we had to get people from the national labs to come speak and get people who were doing home performance work to talk about their jobs. It was really sort of loose and production value was low. But we had this great meeting with lots of data and we had scientists and contractors that came together. And every time I've done it, I have felt like my connections to the industry as a whole have sort of gotten better and better. And I have gotten work from that. And I do think you can do that anywhere. For a minute, there was a humid climate forum and now maybe there's a cold climate forum being started. And there's building science and beer happening all over you should go to those things and speak.
Yeah. And I'll just weigh in here. I think, making that kind of industry involvement more visible in the world is an important thing from the standpoint of how you appeal to your local market. And there's a fair, some growing evidence that kind of expertise and authoritativeness that comes from that kind of stuff is the kind of thing that is promoting more visibility in AI, which is all of us should be thinking about.
Absolutely.
One of the things I love about your website is this very prominent sort of section of your homepage. Are we the right company for your home? At Balance Point Home Performance, we set high standards. If you decide to work with us, you can rest assured knowing that your home performs well beyond what building codes require. Our team takes extra care and time to get every job done right. We're not for everyone, but if you want a home for life, we should talk. And so say a little bit more about the origin of that and how it has worked.
We were just overwhelmed. We were doing the home performance with Energy Star sort of audit or assessment, right? And then BPI got involved and they added all the safety and gas line sniffing. And so we were going to people's houses and this should be a complaint many people are familiar with, right? We were there for 6 hours. I had to write a report that took us hours longer. And then we didn't get the job, right? And so we were like, something has to change. And it was just out of frustration. We would get these other jobs where people would just call us and say, my house is really uncomfortable. I think I need, attic insulation and a new HVAC system. And we said, can we come out and do some testing and talk about your house? And the testing and sort of basic explanation of building science without geeking out and driving people crazy would sell the job. There's a big piece of showing up at somebody's house with, 10 black cases and pulling test equipment out for the right customer. That's super motivating. And so the website just helps, it just filters out the people that aren't those people. Right.
So just make sure that everybody understands your process. So first of all, you are inside sales.
Yes. Inside sales, outside sales.
Yeah. So when the call comes, they've made it through the filter of your website. What happens on that call? And then how do you qualify and make the decision about whether it is worth the diagnostic visit? And do you charge for that diagnostic visit?
For a long time, so I take the phone call and I just try to listen to people, right? What is it? Why are we having this conversation? What are your motives? And if I can suss out in that initial conversation that their motives are, they're uncomfortable and they need the best price, then I give them away, right? It's just, please call these people. They will help you. I'm not the right person for you. And if you decide that maybe I am, call me back, right? I try to be really nice about it. And I'd actually learned this piece from Keith O'Hara in eco performance builders in the Bay Area, they started a process where they're doing sort of the sale and then the evaluation and adjusting the sale if they need to. And so that is it's easier than trying to sell somebody something expensive, right? So I go and I meet them and I talk about their house and do a cursory inspection of the building, and I make a bunch of notes, and then I write a work scope with a bunch of ballparks on it. And I said, I hate ballparks. They're so frequently really wrong, but this is where I think your job is going to end up. And if you're interested, I'm going to come back and we're going to measure everything. We're going to do a load calc. We're going to do a blower door test. We're going to do all of the things. And then we're going to turn this into an actual contract. And that seems to be working.
Okay. And so does that person who has received that ballpark have any obligation at that point?
No, they don't have to talk to me ever again.
How's your batting average? I mean, how many times do you spend the time to go do the scope and it doesn't turn out?
Very rarely, because Balance Point is small and I haven't built this sort of administrative portion of it. What happens, my big problem is that I hit a double and then forget to run, right? Like, like they're already likely to be a positive, experience. And then I just don't get to them fast enough. And so if you can figure out a way to get good leads, then your batting average can be really high.
Well, I guess that's, I think the thing that's probably most interesting in this conversation is that you have built this reputation and you don't really do any with serious marketing at all. And yet what you're saying in answering these questions is almost everybody who calls knows exactly what they're in for in terms of a pretty expensive, comprehensive retrofit project.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that.
And so what do you is that word of mouth? Is it they heard about what you did for their friend?
It's word of mouth. And I should do a better job of asking that question, right? So I could answer this more effectively. A bunch of it's word of mouth. And then another piece of it is just frustration. I've already had 4 contractors out to the house. I spent all this. The job that I'm working on right now is a high humidity house. And he's got a dehumidifier installed in his crawl space. He's got exhaust fans cut through the rim joist all the way around the crawl space that exhaust. Whenever the dehumidifier thinks the humidity is too high, it turns on all those fans in itself and it does all this stuff. The fans are installed so that they couldn't possibly work. The dehumidifier does work. And nobody put a vapor barrier on the soil, which all the building performance folks who are on the call are like, well, they should have done that first, right? And so that guy is just frustrated because he's spending thousands and thousands of dollars and nothing is changing, right? And so he dove in and he found the website and he's like, well, these people seem like they might actually know something. Look at their website, right? And so that, so it's kind of a crappy path, right? He went through a bunch of pain before he found us.
Yeah.
But he's an easy customer for me because he says, I have this problem. I know exactly what to do about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. But there's no humidity in a dry climate like California.
Yeah. Except for under the houses.
Okay. I think one of the things that is a lot of people think when they hear about companies like you or about Keith, you're doing business in this very rarefied place called California where, everybody has a lot of money. Everybody understands the relationship between the carbon footprint of their building and climate change, and they're very motivated. Disabuse us of that notion if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with it. I mean, there's obviously some truth to it, but really, if you live within 100 miles of Seattle, New York City, Chicago, there's some southern cities that I can't think of that would fit the bill, right? There are these metropolitan areas with, pretty educated clientele that are going to sort of be concerned about those issues already. And they'll be aware of building science at some level. And so I don't think California is an island in that sense. And the county that I live in is almost always goes Republican in the political map, right? Which without meaning to upset anybody, right? In really general terms, more conservative, less likely to believe that global warming is a big issue, right? That belief set, I'm surrounded by those people and we get along fine, right? It's not a problem. It just goes to say that there are tons of people who are sort of my ready customer of both sides of the political spectrum here. And it's not a bunch of crunchy hippies where I live.
Okay. And nor is everybody a retired Facebook executive, right?
Right. No. I do tend to work for more professional people than blue collar people, right? Just because of the numbers that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But not most of these people would not consider themselves to be wealthy.
Okay. You said a minute ago that there's more, I guess, some awareness of building science, and, one of the things we talk repeatedly about here is that generally speaking, most homeowners just don't know, right? They just don't have any clue about building science. They don't know that there is a distinction of a high performance contractor versus a run of the mill contractor. They just don't really have any way to discern. But you're saying that that's different in your area, or that's changing?
I think so. Maybe I didn't say it really well. Maybe the awareness that I'm benefiting from is just an awareness of science, right? Like they're educated people, and so they have studied science at some point, right? And so when I start talking about, how moisture moves in a building, and and airflow being an important, way of moving heat in and out of those kinds of things, it's like the framework for them being able to think about it exists. Maybe they don't know building science per se, but they're, at least have some sort of awareness of science. I frequently feel like my customers are really smart.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things I've been talking a lot about and is that one of the ways that homeowners are becoming smarter is by using AI, both as a way of investigating what do I need to know in order to find a contractor to do a thing, and also taking the quote and sticking it into AI and getting an evaluation of it. Are you seeing that?
I haven't paid enough attention to really kind of identify whether people are doing that with the stuff that I'm providing them. But anecdotally, Judy Rachel, who's a home performance professional in LA, she does testing and evaluation. She works on a lot of homes where people have had mold exposure and other sort of health related issues that are environmental. She got a phone call from somebody that said, I've had 10 experts. I've spent all this money. I've done all these things to my house. Nothing is helping. I asked AI what I should do. And AI said, find a building science professional who owns a blower door camera, a hygrometer, and something else, and who knows how to do these tests. Like that, AI said, do this. And then the person found her.
Yeah.
So that struck me as really different. Like I've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, I've been doing some research. The whole Energy Circle team's been doing some research, and my term for this is I is the high performance contractor's new best friend. So
absolutely. I mean, talk about that's just amazing.
Yeah, Dan, let's wrap. I think I suspect that most people listening to this are not necessarily big, right, contractors, but they're probably bigger than you, right? They might have a couple crews and a couple of trucks. And I imagine them listening to this conversation saying, I'm not sure how to get to Dan's level of performance. And what would you say to them?
So I think that the sort of public presence that's not advertising, right, is super important. And I also think that whoever is that person needs to be a building science geek. I think that they also have to have skills when it comes to talking to people, right? And so I think in order for these companies to sort of become the person sought after by the mature market, that somewhere in the organization, the person that is associated with that company needs to be the person who's just really on top of, this is how it works. This is why it's better. And it needs to be uncompromising. Like the bigger the company gets, the more likely you are to have to do things just to keep the doors open, right? And so then once the keeping the doors open work becomes normal, then it's really hard to turn to somebody else and say, but we should really do this other thing, right? And so the thing that's worked for Balance Point is we don't do the keep the doors open work, right? We just do this other thing. And in the beginning, to keep the doors open, like I dug ditches and built fences and all that kind of stuff, but I never built an HVAC system that I wasn't happy with, right? So develop the expertise and real technical expertise and get your face out there in front of people and track down all of the nerdy, geeky, passive house, all of the builders like that within however many miles and become their contractor.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's a great way to wrap. Thank you very much for coming on. Really great to have you. And, you're just an awesome example for everybody.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we got to do this. I've been looking forward to it for a while.
The High Performance Edge podcast is brought to you by our company, Energy Circle, the marketing agency that for 15 years has served the most successful high-performance contractors in the country. Curious about whether we might be a good fit for your marketing and website needs? It begins with a no-obligation, no hard sales discussion of your business and goals and an honest assessment of whether we can make an outsized impact on your company. Check out energycircle.com or email me directly at peter@energycircle.com.